not just newly qualified drivers, though those in particular, but all drivers on the roads. Because if somebody learns something new through a client-centred approach, then they are encouraged to take responsibility for that learning and also to recognise that all their actions have consequences and that they have decisions and choices that they can make at any time that could have risky or less risky outcomes. And what we wanted to do with the conference was to help bridge this gap between academics and practitioners, to give people a much clearer insight into where coaching and client-centred learning has come from. So what I'm going to do with this presentation that I've put together is talk to you specifically about the conference that takes place on Monday the 23rd of June this year, and I know that a few of you have already bought tickets for it. So I'm going to talk to you specifically about the conference, but the broader underlying message will be about coaching and client-centred learning. So the agenda of what I'm going to go through is, first of all, I'm going to talk about 3 reasons why you should come to the conference and why you will get a huge amount from the conference if you do attend. 3 reasons. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about the speakers that we've invited to talk at our conference. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the trade stands that we'll have at the conference, a little bit about the venue and how you can sort out accommodation, and the deal that for some of you won't be relevant because you've already bought your tickets. So first of all, 3 reasons why you would want to come to this conference and why you would get a lot out of it. Firstly, to keep learning. Secondly, to get ideas and feedback. And thirdly, to network like crazy. So let's take a look at the first reason, to keep learning. When we're learning, then what you're going to be able to do through the conference is increase your knowledge and understanding of the new standards check. We run a lot of training days with tri-coaching across the country on a regular basis, and these training days seem to be becoming increasingly popular and seem to be showing that the people who've taken some form of further training, not just through tri-coaching, but some form of further training, are actually doing very well with the new standards check and gaining an A grade. So the conference is going to help increase your knowledge about the new standards check. It's also going to help increase your knowledge about the National Driver and Rider Training Standard, because there seems to be a little bit of a lack of understanding that the new standards check hasn't just appeared out of nowhere, and that we've had a national driver and rider training standard underpinning the new standards check for quite some time through the Modernising Driver Training programme that was actually set up at least 10 years ago by the DSA at the time, the Driver Standards Agency. And the National Driver and Rider Training Standard has more recently been linked to the National Occupational Standards, which really is getting the whole industry ready to be able to change the way that we look at qualifying driving instructors, so that we can make a move away from the parts 1, 2 and 3 and look at coming in line with national occupational standards and having vocational qualifications. And these vocational, or this vocational qualification, will then be transferable. That if somebody gains an NVQ in driving instruction, the skills that they've needed have been mapped against the national occupational standards, and they will be transferable and recognised across the workforce and in all forms of employment. What the conference will also do is help increase your knowledge about client-centred learning. In particular, this will be because it's coming from the academics. and the academics that we've asked and invited to talk at our conference know all about how the brain works, all about eye movements, what kind of information we process through our eyes and then we take into the brain, and how that information processing works, and how through client-centered learning and coaching we can address the way that people learn most effectively by helping them make decisions and take responsibility. This will also help increase your knowledge about the Goals for Driver Education framework. When I introduce you to Ian Holden, who's a senior educationalist at the DVSA, then I can tell you a bit about a conversation I had with him only today, where he was talking very interestingly and at great length about the GDE framework. It will increase your knowledge and understanding about psychology and how the brain works, and also the limitations of where we can go with client-centered learning and where we're not equipped to go with client-centered learning and coaching. There's a limit to how much we can push and delve into somebody's psychology and into somebody's background without potentially causing serious problems, and we have to be very aware of that. And also it will increase your knowledge and understanding about crash prevention, because it's about remembering that coaching and client-centered learning is only relevant because it raises self-awareness and it builds responsibility, and that means that people on the roads are able to manage their own risk through an understanding of their personality and characteristics much more effectively than if they've just been taught more or less by rote to learn to drive. The second reason why you will want to come to this conference and why you will get a lot of benefit from it is to get ideas and feedback. You'll have the opportunity with other similar thinking ADIs to share the sort of things that you are working on. You'll also be able to get feedback from others. And this won't be like standing down at the test centre and talking to other driving instructors and getting feedback from them and trying to share with them what you're working on and what you're interested in. This will be about discussing and sharing things with like-minded individuals. This will help give you an outside perspective. You might have some fantastic ideas about what you want to do, where you want to take your business, and to get an outside point of view from a like-minded individual can be really helpful. It also gives you the opportunity to hear what others are doing and to ask any questions. So to get that feedback is an excellent opportunity that the conference presents. And the third great reason for coming to the conference is to network like crazy. This is about spending time specifically for networking, about building up relations and contacts, because connections can benefit from career or brand. I can't think what I meant by that, sorry.
I was just about to ask you. I was sitting here.
I'm just looking at it and I can't think what that meant. It's about the connections that you make will benefit from your career and your brand. No, it's not that,
no,
is
it's about it can benefit your career. So, but
it can benefit your career and your brand. Thank you, Jackie. Brand. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. You've been very well up till then. What this does as well is it builds your professional network. So if you're there, hand out and collect business cards from people, exchange this and build networks with them. And stand up. What often happens at conferences is that people choose the seat that they're going to sit in, and then they make a beeline for that seat and they don't mingle and they don't mix with anybody. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and network, because it makes a big difference to your career and your brand. So now what I want to talk about is the speakers that we have at the conference. I'm really, really excited about the speakers that we're going to have at this conference. They're very special people, all of them. We've got Dr. Gregor Bartle. I'm going to go through each one in turn in a moment, so I'll just list them now. Dr. Lisa Dawn, David Bloxage, Trevor Wedge, Professor David Crundle, Ian Holden, Dr. Christian von Neuerberg, and myself, Susan McCormack. So Dr. Gregor Bartle. I met Gregor probably about 7 or 8 years ago when I was invited to Norway to do a presentation at a conference of driving instructors, and there were 300 driving instructors there, and there were just 3 or 4 speakers, and there was myself, and there was Dr. Gregor Bartle and Nick Saunders, who was at the time part of Sieka and now works for Mercedes-Benz as the head of training, and another man from Sweden. And Dr. Gregor Bartle back then, so 8 years ago, was talking about coaching, and in particular about the client-centered relationship, the equal relationship. And he used hands coming together, which is what I often use when demonstrating what a client-centered relationship should be. And he's one of these, in my opinion, extremely charismatic people that you just can't help but like. He headed up the Merit Project, which concluded in 2004, and he wrote a lot about minimum European requirements for driving instructor trainers, which is what Merit stands for. And he also headed up the Hermes project, which concluded in 2010, though it still has some ongoing things with it. And Hermes was set up deliberately to develop a 3-day training program for coaches. So it was a train the trainer course, and you can download this course and learn from it. And you can also download tens and tens and tens of scenarios that you can put into practice in the car, which will mean that if you copy them, you will be coaching. So it's a very down-to-earth approach. And he's a doctor of psychology from Austria, Vienna, Viennese University in Austria. So we're really, really honoured to have him talking at the conference. He will be our keynote speaker, and he'll be talking in the afternoon. Then we have Dr. Lisa Dawn. Lisa works at Cranfield University. She's a reader. I'm not quite sure what that means, but it's above a lecturer at Cranfield. Now, Cranfield is a postgraduate university. It only looks at postgraduate stuff. In other words, there's no bachelor's degrees being delivered at Cranfield. The only degrees that are being delivered are master's degrees or postgraduate certificates. And she is in the psychology department and focuses on human factors and driver behaviour. And I did my master's degree in driver behaviour and education in 2009, 2010 at Cranfield University under Dr. Lisa Dawn. And I first met her probably getting on for 10 years ago now, when I went and listened to her talking at a PACS conference, and she was speaking about not attitude, but she was speaking about cognitive skills and the way that people don't just drive based on skills, but they drive based on their thoughts and feelings.
Yes.
And how their thoughts and feelings affect their behaviour and influence their behaviour every time. At the moment, she's very much into telematics. She's very interested in how people drive, the actual way that they respond in their driving. And she has worked with another key psychologist and researcher, and together they've developed acceleration. And acceleration is about how you use your foot on the gas pedal and how you can actually monitor somebody's anticipation skills, hazard perception skills, by the way that they use the accelerator and whether they use it smoothly or not. And that then indicates to you their risky tendencies in their personality. So we're very honoured to have her talking at the conference. Then we have David Bloxage. Dave Bloxage did his master's degree at the same time as I did, and he's actually a firearms officer. He's not involved in driver training, but what he was particularly interested in was this dual role that police officers often have to play, which is being the pursuit driver as well as the firearms officer. And was it possible that any human being could make that switch from having been in high pursuit following another road user to then having to make that critical decision to fire or not? So he was very interested in that, and he was particularly interested in the physiological responses that people had to stress. And that, of course, this thing about red mist and being a pursuit driver as a police officer or being a firearms officer and having to make the decision to fire produces an amazing physiological response because it's a stressful response. So his particular thesis was focusing around this. And since then he's become even more involved in the decisions that go on in the brain, in the way that we make decisions, and in particular the things that influence those decisions. So, for example, change blindness. If you, and this is very closely linked to the look but fail to see crashes that happen with motorcyclists in particular, where the driver looks when emerging from a junction but fails to see a motorcyclist coming from the right. And it is because of the way the eye works. So we look to the right and it looks clear, we look back, and when we look to the left and when we look back to the right, the brain builds up a picture of what it saw before and misses the motorcyclist that might suddenly be there. So what he's particularly interested in is this ability to change our minds. It's impossible, even if you suddenly see that motorcyclist, to change your mind if you've decided to go. In the same way as it's impossible if you've asked the perpetrator to stand or put the hands up or whatever it is as a firearms officer, and they've actually turned around in surrender or to run away, that the firearms officer can shoot them in the back and then ends up in court over this. And researchers and psychologists come in and demonstrate that it was impossible for that firearms officer to change his mind or her mind, having decided to shoot. So I find that all very fascinating,
Yes.
and he's going to be talking about that.
Yeah.
Do you like that, Jackie?
Yeah, I do. So I look forward to hearing that. Yeah, very interesting.
And then we have Trevor Wedge. I mean, these aren't necessarily in order, but Trevor used to be the chief driving examiner at the Driving Standards Agency, and he became famous, for want of a better word, at the DSA because he was actually the person who developed hazard perception. And I can remember when I used to work for DSM, he would be going all around the country, and the hazard perception test, you'll remember, came out in 2004. So this was 2002, 2003, and around 2004, he was going all around the country talking to different groups, ADI groups, and explaining about the hazard perception test. And at that time as well, they invited several groups on several occasions over to Talbot House in Nottingham, the DSA headquarters, to talk about hazard perception. And Trevor Wedge, as a result of that, went on to rise through the ranks to Deputy Chief Driving Examiner under Mike Ambrose, and then became chief driving examiner with Nigel Harries at one point as his deputy, and Ian Holden and Mark McGee in his team as well. Trevor Wedge is at the conference because he has this historical perspective that he can give us about where coaching and client-centred learning has come from in our industry, because I remember him heading up the consultation into CPD, continuing professional development, and whether CPD should be compulsory or not. But what he was particularly interested in was the notion of assessment, self-assessment and reflection, reflective practice. He's an educationalist himself. And he is currently involved, he is now a consultant of his own company, or consultant and runs and manages his own company, and he goes all over the world talking about various road safety issues. So he will be very interesting to listen to. Then we have, I keep pressing the wrong button there, Professor David Crumble. He's only recently become a professor. He was Dr. David Crumble up until just over a year ago, in fact, and he was Dr. David Crumble at Nottingham University, and he is now Professor at Nottingham Trent University. And he worked under Professor Geoffrey Underwood and worked with, I can't remember his name, Peter Chapman, Dr. Peter Chapman. And what they were particularly always interested in was hazard perception, but they would go to the extent of having pots on heads, you know, eye movement monitors when they were out driving, filming people and showing the difference between experienced drivers and where they looked, and inexperienced drivers and where they looked. And I worked with that team when I was at BSM because we developed the hazard perception program in the BSM driver training simulator. Well, BSM and I developed that, and then we worked with David Crumble in particular to develop a research program that would show how novice drivers respond to hazards in comparison to experienced drivers in terms of eye movements. And what has already been well documented anyway was that novice drivers, inexperienced drivers, don't look, they don't move their eyes in the same way as experienced drivers. So they're not taking in this big picture. Novice drivers tend to focus at the road marking, for example, and they don't have a peripheral vision that is developed. So what they actually have to do, which is really amazing I find, is they have to move their heads so that what they are focusing on is coming into that 3 degrees or whatever it is of central focus, and that's the only way that they can process information without getting task overload. Whereas as we become more experienced as drivers, and the research shows us this takes about 2 years, as we become more experienced as drivers, we're able to move our eyes more effectively, and we're also able to take in information and process information in the peripheral of our vision. So David Crumble, I'm not quite sure what he's going to be talking about, but I think he suggested today in an email that it could be about motorcyclists and car drivers, and that because he's very interested in that, the coming together, hopefully successfully, of motorcyclists and car drivers, or eye movements and how the brain works. So that should be a very interesting talk.
Yeah, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
I hope you don't mind me interrupting and asking this, but
Not at all.
you said novice drivers. When you say novice drivers, do you particularly mean novice drivers who also happen to be young, or do you mean generally novice drivers?
Well, It is an interesting question, because this research shows us, I mean, this used to be the case, but the research used to show us that the inexperience was regardless of age.
Yes.
The fact that somebody was now taking responsibility for all the decisions behind the wheel meant, regardless of the age they were at, they would be classed as novice or inexperienced. However, it's perfectly, you know, if somebody's been riding a motorcycle, then that inexperience is going to be less, isn't it?
Of course. Yeah.
And if somebody's been a passenger and they're a little bit older, again, or they've ridden a push bike. So these are generalisations.
They are, but the reason I ask, Sue, is because I do actually have at the moment a client base that seems to have quite a lot older. I've got some people in their 50s. And yes. Two in particular, actually. One man, he's 53, and a lady who's 54. Now, he's had motorbike experience, but he's still struggled a little bit with what he's seeing on the road in the car. She only has experience on her push bike and as a passenger in the car. What I'm experiencing with her with regards to looking and scanning and what she's taking in and what she's seeing, and very much a lot of fixating, is that she is the same as those who are 18, 19 inexperienced in what she can and cannot see. And I have found that really interesting whilst I've been teaching her, and thinking this is exactly the same as the youngsters, which is why I interrupted you, because this is an interesting thing, because we tend to think inexperienced because the brain hasn't fully developed, the frontal lobe of the brain under 25 hasn't fully developed, so eye scanning isn't as easy. That's a nice easy sort of solution, or that's the reason why. But suddenly here I am with somebody who's in her mid-50s, and she's having the same struggles.
Yes, yes. Well, that would be backed up, wouldn't it, by the research which says it is regardless of age.
Of age, yes.
It's the 2 years. What they used to say, see, I don't know now if that's changed, but what they used to say quite categorically was, you are an inexperienced driver for 2 years, because after 2 years, your crash involvement will be equal to that of an experienced driver, and that 2-year time frame was regardless of age.
Yes.
So regardless of how old you were when you passed your driving test, statistically, remember this is statistics,
yes,
statistically you are as at risk as any other inexperienced driver.
Yeah.
So, interesting, isn't it?
It is, yes. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Christian von Neuberg is used to work with Dr. Jonathan Passmore at University of East London, and it is and he was also Graham Hooper's tutor when Graham was studying psychology, coaching psychology at UEL. And it is through Christian that we've actually got the conference set up at UEL, which is brilliant because we wanted to follow in the footpath of Dr. Jonathan Passmore, who really made a big difference to our industry by coming in and showing us that, or not, he wasn't the only person, but he did have a big influence at the time, because what he did was he developed a coaching course, and he ran this pilot, or this coaching course, as a pilot with the police first of all, and he went into the Metropolitan Police and he worked with them to have a look and see what difference coaching would make to the police and their driver training practices. And he then worked really hard with our industry to see what difference coaching could make, or to see if we could come up with a piece of research that would show that coaching made a difference. And it was on one of his pilots, and he himself personally only ran one for ADIs, and there were 16 ADIs on that course. And that's where I met John Farland for the first time and Graham Hooper for the first time. But on that course also were the likes of Jed Wilmot Kathy Higgins, Lynn Barry, Colin Scott, can't remember who else, but some key names in the industry. And Christian has recently written a book, which is a really interesting book, which is all about coaching. And what the book does is because I've read it, it sets out in really straightforward ways how to coach. And it is nothing to do with driver training. It's about the psychology of coaching. And the great thing about it is that it is backed up by videos. And these are little 5 or 6 minute videos, or shorter even, that are actually genuinely filmed with his students at UEL and their practice conversations that they're having, that give us great insight in how to manage a coaching conversation. So he's going to be talking more briefly at the conference. Ian Holden is the senior educationalist at the DVSA. He's actually very, very interesting, I find, because he's, I would call, quite eccentric in terms of a civil servant and somebody who works with the DSA. He heads up now the Modernising Driver Training Programme, and he's particularly inspired by the idea of bringing in a vocational qualification. He's for driving instructors. He's the person who is spearheading that whole thing. So he's picked up where Trevor Wedge, who was his boss, left off. He goes to SIACA. I always forget what SIACA stands for, but it's international. It's all about road safety, and it's an international consortium, and they have several groups coming together, and they've got a key meeting next week on the 23rd of May. Gregor Bartle will be at that key meeting as well, but it's all split up into a number of different groups. What Ian Holden was telling me that he's particularly interested in is the GDE, the Goals for Driver Education Framework. He's concerned that driving instructors are teaching the framework to their clients rather than addressing the framework with their clients. And he's also concerned that there isn't anything formally in place, though he's not convinced that there should be. There isn't anything formally in place for trainers. So should there be another GDE framework, for example, or a hierarchical, because that's what it is basically, a hierarchical framework for trainers? Or he was saying for civil servants in the DSA, what their goals, aims and objectives and visions are on the higher levels, and how they actually interact and relate with people on the lower levels. And he came up with some really good examples, like, for example, a surgeon. And on the lower levels of this hierarchical framework of the goals framework, on the lower levels, a surgeon would have all the skills and abilities that they needed in order to be able to cut somebody up, remove any diseased part, and then sew them up again. And they would be seen as being highly skilled in this area, and they would also know how to relate in theatre with the rest of the doctors and nurses around them in order to interact safely, and not just to treat that patient as a piece of meat that they needed to carve up. And I don't mean to offend anybody. However, what about if that surgeon, this was the example that Ian Holden used, and I'm sure he would explain it much better than me, but what about if that surgeon then decided to set up a practice over in America, say, for example, enhancing boobs on women or raising buttocks on men, and getting really involved in cosmetic surgery, because that surgeon saw that this was something that was actually fulfilling his goals and ambitions on those higher levels of the GDE, because what he wanted was to earn loads of money and to be seen as being the surgeon to the stars. And do you get where I'm going with that, really?
Yes.
That, you know, how those higher levels
Yes.
influence the lower levels. And what he was trying to get across, I think, really was that, and I'm not sure that I entirely agree with him on this, but is that he's concerned that we're making too much of the GDE. Well, we know that's not true because so many ADIs haven't even heard of the GDE. But he's a little bit concerned that it'll become too rigidly, that people will attempt to address it too rigidly. And the point that I was making to him was that this is where coaching comes in. That you can only appreciate how to address the higher levels of the GDE framework with a customer if you have great self-awareness and if you have the ability to establish rapport with your customer and you practice your listening skills and your questioning skills and your feedback, because otherwise you are just going to go in there like a bull in a china shop. So that the only way to address the higher levels of the GDE is to coach. And Ian Holden didn't use the word coaching, but used the word client-centered and is passionate about it. So that will be very interesting. And then we have me, and I'm going to be talking about tri-coaching partnership, I think, and I will have a think about what else to talk about that will wrap up the conference and leave everybody inspired and motivated. How are we doing for time, Jackie?
You're fine. It's 10 to 9 at the moment. So you know, whatever you
okay.
Like. Haven't got any
so
questions.
Shall I just tell you? Shall I tell you briefly about the trade stands?
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah.
Okay, we have a number of trade stands, and we've tried to give as much time as possible throughout the conference in between the speakers. So on arrival, there's a registration time slot of about 45 minutes. There's a morning break of 40 minutes, a lunch break of an hour and a quarter, an afternoon break of 40 minutes, and then the actual going home time, because we want people to have this opportunity to visit trade stands. The people that we've got coming along so far, and we still hope to bring in some more exhibitors, we've got ADI NDI, AD&D. This is an organisation run by Tina Johnson-Fidel to provide services for ADIs. And Tina has been around for longer than I have in the driver training industry, and knows it extremely well and knows how to support driving instructors and help them feel supported whilst they maintain their independence. So she will be there. Then we've got the MSA, the Motor Schools Association, and we'll have a couple of representatives from the MSA, possibly John Lepine, the General Manager himself, will be there, ready to talk to people. We've also got ROSPA. Keith Bell is responsible for some of the working with the fleet ADIs and their driver training, and he's going to be there, so that's brilliant. We don't usually get the likes of ROSPA coming along to a conference, and equally we've got one of their direct competitors. So we've got Rick Wood from ROSPA, and we've got Simon Elstow from the Institute of Advanced Motorists, IAM. Rick Wood, incidentally, was also on the pilot at UEL that was delivered by Jonathan Parsmore. Oh. Then we have ACA Pharos. Now, Pharos was the company that BSM went to and bought 90 simulators from over a period of years, from 1995 till 10 years. BSM had driving simulators for 10 years, and I maintained a relationship with Pharos, and they still develop driving simulators, which are very interesting for driver training, not least because in some circumstances some ADIs would find it really useful to be able to develop skills in a simulator, basic car control skills, and then be able to concentrate more fully on the interaction with other road users, the route planning, and how their personality impacts on the way they control the vehicle. We've also got extra driving school. They may not be calling themselves this, but this is a couple of people, one of whom has come from Norway, and he's particularly interested in developing a structured learning program using video that ADI and classroom that ADIs can deliver to their learner drivers that will enable ADIs to earn a much better income and to have a far greater structure there. So it is something, they've got an opportunity for ADIs that isn't about getting involved in a franchise, and it is about maintaining independence, but it is equally about giving those ADIs who want it a set of tools and techniques that will enhance massively the way they teach people to drive. And we've also got Tri-Coaching Partnership, a trade stand by Tri-Coaching Partnership, who will be talking about the different qualifications that we have on offer. Let me tell you a little bit about the venue. We have an amazing venue, and in particular I'm very pleased with it because where the trade stands are is in what's called the atrium, which is a huge walk-through corridor. And it means very often at conferences I've noticed that the trade stands are packed into a small area that doesn't give you the opportunity necessarily to move freely around. So the location is really great, and this is at the Docklands Campus of the University of East London. There is no car parking on the site. However, there is a huge shopping centre called Galleon's Reach that you can park your car at free of charge for the day, and this is a 5-minute bus ride or a 15-20 minute walk away. And on our website we've got more detailed information about that. However, one of the best ways to get into London is through public transport, and the Dockland Light Railway has a station that is on the Docklands campus of UEL, and you get off the train there and you walk 2 seconds and you're in the conference. We also have student accommodation available. We have a number of rooms available at £50 a room per night. These rooms are single ensuite rooms, and they are student accommodation. That means that they are right bang slap on the campus. If you came down on a Sunday by car, or say you wanted to make a weekend of it and stay Saturday night and Sunday night, which you can do, you can park your car on the campus at the weekend, but you just have to move it on Monday morning. There are a load of hotels around, and on the website we've put up some links to Premier Inns in particular, Travelodge, and places around. There's a very popular one called Beckton, popular because it's got a link with the railway, the DLR, and that's a Premier Inn. So have a look there. And if you want to fly, Mirza, I don't know if you're still there. If you want to fly, then yes, flights go from Glasgow direct to London City Airport. Is he still there?
Yes.
Yeah, so flights go from Glasgow direct to London City Airport, and London City Airport is there at on Docklands. The deal that I'm going to offer you. Well, the conference starts at 8:45 AM for registration and finishes at 4:45 PM. Tickets cost £125. This includes entrance to all the speakers, a set of conference proceedings, refreshments morning and afternoon, and lunch. Because you have listened to this webinar, I will offer you 20% off the price of the ticket. £100 instead of £125. And if you are interested in this, then contact us by visiting the website trycoachingconference2014.co.uk, or ring or text Sarah on 07740 17 48 93, or ring 0800 058 8009.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. That was excellent. Really good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have no questions in here at the moment. Has anybody got any questions for Sue at the moment at all? What do you say the name of the Premier Inn is? Because I'm quite interested. I was taking a look actually at Premier Inns the other night.
Have a look at the website, because there's several links up there,
Yes.
but there's one in particular in Beckton, Becton.
I think that might have been the one I was looking at. And you said the light railway is there as well.
Yeah, you walk out of the hotel and it's round the corner.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So look that one up. So rather than taking the car any further.
Exactly.
This is the thing, isn't it? That's somewhere easy. Yes. So has anybody got any questions for Sue before we actually end this? I mean, I'm quite excited about this. When I saw Dr. Gregor Bartle talking, I think I said to you that was at SafeX in Dubai in 2006. He is from Austria, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yes. He was talking about the Austrian project for young drivers called L17.
Yes.
And I found that so interesting, what he talked about and how they did it and why. He was an interesting man to listen to.
Yes.
And the project itself was a really interesting one, and it certainly grabbed my attention. So when I saw this and saw that he was there, I thought, oh, that's something, because some people stick with you in your mind, don't you? When you go to a conference, there'll be certain ones that will stand out. And for me, he absolutely stood out at that conference. Yeah. I think he has that skill to be able to speak and hold your attention. It certainly did with me anyway. That's how it works.
No, I totally agree with you, Jackie. He's quite spellbinding.
Yeah. Yes. So, guys, I know a lot of you are already going, but if you are somebody who's been undecided and you come to this tonight, I mean, I would highly recommend, and I was determined I was going to get to this one. All right then. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I have a confession to make, Sue.
Yes.
I forgot to switch the recording on right at the beginning. However, it missed nothing of your actual presentation on the conference, just a few words at the beginning when you were introducing yourself. And I suddenly thought, oh, gosh, Ed wasn't here to kick me. He usually shouts at me on the question box, recording Jackie. Because it's so easy to forget to press the record button. So there's a tiny bit at the beginning that's missing. So when you hear the recording, it'll come in a little bit on you speaking. Okay, so that's my confession and apology, but nothing.
That's all right. Thank you very much.
Okay, but nothing was missed of your presentation. Oh, somebody says here, it's Richard Golding says he'd love to attend. Oh, it has to be at Gatwick Airport that morning. He's put a sad face on. Well, he says sad face because there isn't a face to put it on. Well, perhaps does that mean that you're going on holiday though, Richard? You've got to be at Gatwick
exactly.
Airport?
Cancel your holiday.
Yeah. Oh, I wish. Oh, right. Okay. All right. Well, so he's not going on holiday.
That's a huge shame, Richard.
Oh, well, what a shame. Yes. Well, maybe next year, if this is really successful, perhaps you'll have something similar.
Well, it's a huge effort to pull this together. There won't be another conference like it, and it certainly wouldn't be next year, but hopefully in 2 years' time.
Right. Well, there's another reason to say to people, come along. So whether you're here now or you're watching this recording, come along. right? Because it's going to be worth it, and it'd be nice to meet the more people we can meet and network like crazy with, because there's as much value in a conference in the networking you do.
Yes.
I find, because well, you know me, I like to chat.
Yes.
But that's what it's all about when you go to a conference. You can go around and chat to people. That's lovely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, if we have no more questions from anybody, thank you very much for attending. Sue, I will give you the registration list, so you will have access to that. You'll be able to email people on it. I'm sure that anybody who wants to ask any questions can find your email address, or I can pass it on to them.
Yes, feel free to email me. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah. Okay. All right then. So I will say thank you very much. I'll end the webinar now, but thank you for being here, Sue, tonight. It was excellent, and you do know that I've been looking forward to you coming on, and sometime after the conference I think we've got another webinar to look forward to from you, haven't we?
Yes, quite possibly, yes.
Yes. A coaching, client-centered style type of event. I mean, you know, we have lots to learn from you, Sue, so there's quite a lot you can choose from, I'm sure.
Okay.
Oh, oh, she says, pushing. But I'm sure lots of people on here as well would like to hear you speaking again as well. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. Have a nice rest of the evening, and I will see you at the conference soon. Just say a quick hello.
Yes, thank you very much, Jackie.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, and I'll end this now, and I'll say